Good day, class. It's me again, Mr. Sagani Magudong, and I will be your facilitator today. Again, welcome to our cookery class. So today, we will just continue for our last two topics on lesson 3. For our new topic, I will discuss cooking terms and their meanings. So class, bakit nga ba importante na dapat niyong malaman or maintindihan at maging familiar regarding sa mga cooking terminologies? Anyone? Okay. It is very important to know a variety of cooking terms in order for us to understand what we are going to be talking about while cooking in the kitchen. Because without a good grasp of some cooking terminologies, you will find it difficult to succeed in your recipe. That's why kailangan natin na mapag-aralan lahat ng mga cooking terminologies. Kasi may mga ibang terms minsan na may encounter natin, especially pag nagbabasa tayo ng recipe book, may mga ilang terms doon na mahirap intindihin once na wala tayong idea regarding those cooking terminologies. Like for example, may mga terms like score. So kapag hindi ka familiar sa mga cooking terminologies, medyo magugulat ka or maguguluhan ka, ano nga ba ang ibig sabihin ng score? Yan ba yung pag naglaro ka at nanalo ka, may score ka? So in culinary kasi, iba yung terms, iba yung definition nila or ibig sabihin nila doon sa isang term like such as yung sinabi ko kanina na score. So meaning kasi ng score sa culinary is to slice. Diba? So kaya importante natin na mapag-aralan lahat ng mga cooking terminologies. Narito ay yung mga list of terminologies na usually na mai-encounter ninyo sa kitchen or in our subject. Okay, let's start. Number 1, al dente. Italian term used to describe pasta that is cooked until it offers a slight resistance to bite. In other words, when you say al dente, it describes in terms to pasta or rice that is cooked to be firm to bite, to be bite. So yung salitang al dente po, nanggaling siya sa, it is actually an Italian word na ang ibig sabihin ay to the tooth. So again, pag sinabing al dente, it's only pertaining sa pagluto ng pasta. Na ang ibig sabihin dapat, yung pagluto ng pasta is dapat firm pa rin siya kapag kinagat. Next, barbecue. Usually used generally to refer to grilling done outdoors or over an open charcoal or wood fire. More specifically, barbecue refers to long, slow, direct heat cooking, including liberal basting with a barbecue sauce. So, ang ibig sabihin po ng barbecue, of course, it is a particular method of cooking whereby one suspends meat over burning coals on a wooden framework. Alam niyo ba na ang salitang barbecue is derived from Spanish word na barbacoa? Na ang ibig sabihin ng barbacoa ay wooden structure. Next, baste. To moisten foods during cooking with pan, drippings, or special sauce to add flavor and prevent drying. So, baste or basting, again, ang ibig sabihin niya is to moisten foods, especially mga meat, at intervals with a liquid tulad ng mga melted butter, fat, or yung tinatawag nga natin na pan drippings. Especially during the cooking process. So bakit ginagawa yung basting or pagbe-baste sa mga pagkain? In order to prevent it from drying, and at the same time, nakakatulong din siya to add flavor when you baste, for example, yung mga roasting. So nakakatulong din siya na mag-add ng flavor. Aside from maiwasan na maging dry yung mismong, like for example, yung mga niro-roast natin. Okay, naintindihan po ba? Next, butter. A mixture containing flour and liquid thin enough to pour. So, when you say butter, sabi nga dyan, it is a thin flour mixture that can be easily poured in a pan. So, usually, ang butter, ginagamit siya mainly for pancakes, yung paggawa ng cakes, yung tinatawag natin na light cakes, and even sa mga coating for fried foods such as tempura. So, yun po yung butter. Next, beat. To mix rapidly in order to make a mixture smooth and light by incorporating as much as air as possible. In cooking, yung term na beat or beating is the act of mixing or stirring ingredients rapidly until they are blended. Ang example nito is yung egg whites. Egg whites can be beaten until they are light and airy and volume has increased. So, yung tinatawag natin na meringue. So, that is beating. Next, blanch. To immerse in rapidly boiling water and allow to cook slightly. Pag sinabing blanch po, ang blanch or blanching is a cooking process wherein food, usually a vegetables or fruits, is scalded in boiling water and removed after a brief time interval and finally plunged into ice water or placed under cold water to halt the cooking process. So, ang ibig sabihin po ay, for example, yung mga gulay. Kasi 'di ba basic usually ang vegetable po ay hindi siya hindi siya ino-overcook. So, much better na i-blanch nyo or i-immerse nyo or ilubog nyo sa mainit na tubig yung gulay and then ng ilang minuto saka nyo siya hahanguin. And then yung ibang ginagawa nila para ma-stop yung cooking process, pinababad or ilulubog uli nila yon sa ice cold water. Okay? Next, boil. Blend. To incorporate 2 or more ingredients thoroughly. So, in other words, when you say blend, it is a process of combining 2 or more ingredients together so that they lose their individual characteristic and become smooth and uniform. Ang example po ng blend or blending is yung paggawa ng cake batter. Cake batter is the result of dry and liquid ingredients that are blended together in a uniform mixture. Again, boil. It means to heat a liquid until bubbles break continually on the surface. So again, ang boiling is a cooking of food by immersions in water that has been heated to near its boiling point, about 212 degree Fahrenheit or 100 degrees centigrade. Last is broil. To cook on a grill under a strong direct heat. When you say broiling, it is a cooking process which involves the use of very high heat for a short period of time. There are 2 different types of broiling. One is, it involves cooking the food in an oven which is set to a broil setting. The other is called pan broiling. Pag sinabing pan broiling, it takes places on the stovetop using dry, high heat. Both produce slightly different ends product, especially pan broiling, which can sometimes be closer to sauteing the broiling. Broiling tends to produce a large amount of smoke, so it is important to do it in conditions with good ventilation. Caramelize. To heat sugar in order to turn it brown and give it a special taste. So caramelize or caramelizing is the process of cooking sugar until it browns. When table sugar or granulated sugar is heated to a high temperature, about 340 degree, it melts and it darkens. Chop. To cut solid into pieces with a sharp knife or other chopping device. So, simply na ikakat nyo lang yung mismong mga ingredients such as fruits and vegetables. Clarify. To separate and remove solid from a liquid, thus making it clear. So, when you say clarify or clarification, it is to make or become clear and free from impurities. So, ang example nito, let's say for example, ay yung paglalaga ng mga karne, like karne ng, let's say, mga buto-buto. So, I don't know kung napansin or napapansin nyo ito na once na naglalaga tayo ng mga buto-buto, may mga lumulutang na parang bubbles or parang cloudy doon sa mismong top ng stocks. So, ang ginagawa doon ng iba ay tinatanggal nila. Ayun yung clarification. So, para just to make it, matanggal yung mga impurities na tinatawag natin. Cream or creaming. To soften a fat, especially butter, by beating it at room temperature. So, ang ginagawa, the butter and sugar are often creamed together until maging smooth at maging soft paste. So, usually ginagawa yung process na to when it comes to baking. Next is cube. To cut food into small, about half-inch cubes. Cure or curing. To preserve meat by drying and salting or smoking. So when you say cure or curing, one of a preservation process na ginagawa sa mga karne ay binababad siya sa tubig na meron asin or sometimes merong mga herbs. So katulad ng mga, kunyari for example, gagawa kayo ng ham. So, yung paggawa ng ham kasi, meron silang tinatawag na brining. So, brining, iba-brine muna nila or i-cure muna nila. Next. Deep fry. To cook by completely immersing food in hot fat. So, I guess you're particular already with deep frying. Ang ginagawa niyan ay, it is one of a cooking method na fully submerged or nakalubog yung pagkain at niluluto siya sa mainit na mantika, sa maraming mainit na mantika. Like for example, ng deep frying ay yung pagpa-fry ng french fries. Yung mga pagdi-deep fry ng mga, let's say for example, yung mga chicken or fried chicken. So that is simply deep fry. Next. Deglaze. To dissolve the thin glaze of juices and brown bits on the surface of a pan in which food has been fried, sauteed, or roasted. So simply, when you say deglaze, it is to do this deglazing, add liquid and stir and scrape over high heat, thereby adding flavor to the liquid for use as a sauce. So, ma-discuss natin to when it comes to kapag nasa preparing stock, soup, and sauces tayo, yung deglazing. Next is degrease. To remove fat from the surface of stews, soup, or stock, usually cooled in the refrigerator so that the fat hardens and easily removed. So yung degrease po is pagtatanggal lang ng mga sebo. So kung minsan may masebong mga soup or stocks, ang ginagawa ng iba para matanggal yung sebo, pinapalamig nila para madaling matanggal yung sebo. So that is degrease or degreasing. Next, dice. To cut food into very small, about 1/8 to 1/4 inch cubes. So, ang dice po, it is a process of cutting food into small cubes of equal size so that the food is evenly cooked and or pleasant in appearance for the recipe. Dicing, unlike chopping or mincing, is a precision cut that is consistent in size. Dredge. To sprinkle or coat with flour or other fine substance. So when you say dredge or dredging, so like for example is yung mga magpa-fried kayo ng, let's say, chicken fillet. So meron makaririnig kayo or mababasa kayo na dredging or pag sinabing dredge or dredging, i-coat nyo lang siya. Parang i-cover nyo siya ng dry ingredients, yung mismong main ingredients nyo, such as for example yung chicken fillet, di ba? Para dun sa pagpa-fry ng chicken fillet, you have to coat it with flour. Drizzle. To sprinkle drops of liquid lightly over food in a casual manner. When you say drizzle, ito po yung paglalagay ng any liquid or syrup sa isang pagkain. Like for example is yung banana split. So ginagawa nila, they do have drizzling of chocolate syrup. Same with yung mga iba't ibang dessert na kailangan ng syrup ay ang method ng paggamit nun ay drizzle. PIPO or first in, first out. First in, first out or PIPO system is the only way to manage your food storage in the kitchen. The term first in, first out is a handy way to remember that the food that has been brought in first needs to be consumed first. This is so that everything is used when it is at maximum freshness and there are no hidden nasty surprises from using out-of-date food that may have gone off. As well as keeping everyone safe, PIPO also avoids food wastage. So simply, when you say PIPO, ginagawa tong sistema na to ng mga mostly ng mga restaurant or maybe sa mga iilang bahay ginagawa rin nila to. So from the word itself, first in, first out, when it comes to food, kung ano yung unang stock ninyo na pagkain, kunyari, let's say for example, para mas may binili ka na bigas almost nung last week, tapos bumili ka uli ngayon ng bigas. Ang gagawin mo, hindi mo pagsasamahin yung bigas na yun at saka yung bigas nung last week mong binili at saka yung bigas na binili mo. Ang gagawin mo muna ay uubusin mo muna yung bigas na nabili mo nung last week. Pag naubos mo na yon, saka mo naman gagamitin yung bago mong binili na bigas. So that is simply the system for PIPO or first in, first out. Next is flambe. To flame food by dosing in some form of potable alcohol and setting alight. So flambe is actually a cooking procedure in which alcohol is added to a hot pan to create a burst of flame. So, yung alcohol po na sinasabi dito is yung, like for example, alcoholic beverages like wine. So, yun po yun. Nilalagay nila doon sa mismong niluluto nila and then nagkakaroon ng burst of flame. Yung salitang flambe po is actually derived from French word which means flame. Next is fricassee. Fricassee is to cook by braising, usually applied to fowl or rabbit. So, fricassee po is a hybrid cooking method that combines both wet and dry heat. It falls halfway between a saute, in which no liquid is added, and a stew, which contains added liquid. Next is julienne. Julienne is to cut vegetable, fruits, or cheeses into thin strips. So, simply when you say julienne, ikakat nyo lang yung mga gulay into matchstick size or shape. Thinly sliced. So, that is julienne. Gratin. From the French word for crust, term used to describe any oven-baked dish, usually cooked in a shallow oval gratin dish on which a golden brown crust of bread scrambled, cheese, or creamy sauce is formed. Again, when you say gratin, it is a culinary technique in which an ingredient is topped with a brown crust, often using breadcrumbs or grated cheese or sometimes egg or butter. So, yun po yung tinatawag natin na gratin. Knead. To work and press dough with the palms of the hands or mechanically to develop the gluten in the flour. So, in Tagalog, pag sinabing knead is pagmamasa. So, usually, ina-apply natin ito sa paggawa ng mga tinapay. So, minamasa natin or nininid natin yung mismong dough to develop gluten. Next, mise en place. A French term meaning to put in place or having all your ingredients measured, cut, peeled, sliced, grated, etc. before you start cooking. So, simply, when you say mise en place, before mag-start po ng pagluluto, piniprepare muna natin lahat ng mga ingredients. Kasama ang mise en place or what we call the pre-preparation, yung washing of foodstuff, or paghuhugas ng mga ingredients such as mga gulay o kaya mga karne or isda, and then cutting of foodstuff. Yun yung paghihiwa na. So, and so on and so forth. So, bago magluto, dapat ready na lahat ng mga ingredients. So, that is mise en place. Next, pan broil. To cook uncovered in a hot fry pan, pouring off fat as it accumulates. So, pan broil is actually a cooking technique used for thin steaks, thin chops, and fish fillet. It is a dry cooking method done in a frying pan on top of the stove with no added fat or liquid. So, ang ginagawa lang, it sears the surface of the meat sort of like proper broiling wood. So, that is pan broil. Pan fry. To cook in a small amount of fat. So, same din. So, ang ginagawa niyo, pag sinabing pan fry, ihitin niyo yung pan, tapos ilalagay niyo, for example, yung it could be meat din. So, pero wala ng, pwedeng merong konti or wala ng fat. Especially kung ang gagamitin nyo is non-stick pan. Diba? So, that is pan fry. Parboil. To boil until partially cooked. To blanch, usually this procedure is followed by final cooking in a seasoned sauce. So, parboil po is a partial or semi-boiling of food as the first step in cooking. It is referring to the partial boiling of an ingredient just until it is soft but not cooked through. Poach. To cook very gently in hot liquid, kept just below the boiling point. When you say poach or poaching, again, it is a cooking technique that involves cooking by submerging food in a liquid. Next, saute. To cook in or brown food in a small amount of hot fat. Saute or sauteing is a method of cooking that uses a relatively small amount of oil or fat in a shallow pan over relatively high heat. Scald. To bring to a temperature just below the boiling point. Scald means to heat a liquid until just below the boiling point, about 180 degrees. It should be heated just until tiny bubbles begin. Or to blanch fruits and vegetables like tomatoes, for instance, to facilitate removal of the skin. Scallop. To bake a food, usually in casserole with sauce or other liquid. Crumbs often are sprinkled over. Scallop, it applied to dishes to describe a style of cooking. There can be scallop potatoes, scallop corn, scallop tomatoes, etc. What all of these have in common is that they are cooked covered in breadcrumbs. Sear. Sear is to brown very quickly by intense heat. This method increases shrinkage but develops flavor and improves appearances. Sear or pan searing is a technique used in grilling, baking, braising, roasting, sauteing, and etc., in which the surface of the food, usually meat, for example, beef, poultry, pork, seafood, is cooked at the high temperature until a brown crust forms. Next, shred. To cut or tear in small, long, narrow pieces. When you say shred, it means to push food across or through a shredding surfaces to make long, narrow strips. To finely shred means to make long, thin strips. Most vegetable can be shredded with a box grater, a hand grater, or a food processor. However, yung mga cabbage, lettuces, and other leafy greens can be easily shredded with a knife. Skim. To remove impurities, whether scum or fat, from the surface of liquid during cooking, thereby resulting in a cleaner tasting final produce. So when you say skim or skimming, it is to take up or remove floating matters from the surface of a liquid, such as for example, mga stocks or soup. So tinatanggal yung mismong mga tinatawag natin impurities na lumulutang using spoon or ladle. Steep. To extract color, flavor, or other qualities from a substance by leaving in it water just below the boiling point. So when you say steep, it is to allow a substance to stand in liquid below the boiling point for extractions of flavor, color, or other qualities. The example of this is yung tea or tsaa. Truss. To secure poultry with string or skewers to hold its shape while cooking. So when you say truss, it means to tie or secure again the bird. Usually nga po yung string or yung sinulid at skewer or sometimes toothpick so that it maintains a tidy and attractive shape during cooking and so the bird retains moisture. So one of example of this is yung paglalagay ng toothpick sa pagluluto ng corn bleu. Whip. beat rapidly to incorporate air and produce expansion as in heavy cream or egg white. So when you say whip, that is also a process of beating an ingredients vigorously to incorporate air, which makes the ingredients porous. For example, egg whites are whipped until the foam or until it forms stiff peaks and heavy cream is transformed into a whipped cream. The basic cooking method. Cooking method can be divided into two subcategories. We have the dry and moist heat method. So example of dry such as baking, roasting, and broiling, while moist heat cooking are braising, stewing, and boiling. Dry heat cooking refers to any cooking technique where the heat is transferred to the food item without using any moisture. These are the example of dry heat cooking method. Number 1, sauteing. Again, sauteing it involves very high heat and very little oil is used. The ingredients are added once the oil starts to smoke slightly. So again, when you say sauteing, only less oil is needed because the high heat prevents moisture from escaping and as well as being safer from oil splattering and potentially causing a fire. Pan frying involves cooking an ingredients in a frying pan at medium-high heat. Pan frying involves a bit more oil than usual as it helps prevent moisture releasing from the ingredients. Roasting, baking uses the air or convection to transfer heat to an ingredients. Roasting is a cooking method that uses dry heat where hot air covers the food, cooking it evenly on all sides with the temperature of at least 150 degrees centigrade from an open flame, oven, or other heat sources. While baking, it is a method of preparing food that uses dry heat, normally in an oven, but can also be done in hot ashes or hot stone. Number 4, grilling. This dry heat method is desired for flavor that is imparted from the rapid convection of cooking. Grilling is a form of cooking that involves dry heat applied to the surface of food, commonly from above, below, or from the side. Number 5, broiling. It is similar and almost reverse to grilling in that it uses radiant heat from an overhead source. Broiled food are placed on the preheated metal grate and the heat above cooks the food while the grill below marks it. Number 6, deep frying. It means to cook in a large amount of hot fat. As odd as it sounds, deep frying is not considered a moist heat method, but rather a dry heat method. Letter B rather. Moist heat cooking includes any techniques that involves cooking with moisture, whether it's steam, water, stock, wine, or some other liquid. So these are the example of moist heat cooking method. Number 1, poaching is the lowest temperature method defined at between 71 degrees centigrade to 82 degrees centigrade. This produces an environment that is calm enough for delicate foods such as eggs. The water should show slight movement and no bubbles. So, like for example is poached egg. So, when making poached egg, you need to use a ramekin and then you have to crack each egg into a small ramekin or glass bowl. Then you will be able to see and remove any bits of shell, and if the yolk ends up getting cracked, you can dispose of the egg without dirtying your poaching water. Then add a splash of vinegar. Dahil ang vinegar in poaching water helps keep the whites together. It firms up the protein on the outer surface of the egg, making the egg rounder and the white less wispy. Take note, don't boil the water. Dropping a raw egg into boiling water is the recipe for scrambled egg soup. So get the water hot by bringing it a boil over high heat, then lower the heat until the water is just barely simmering. Number 2, simmering. A common temperature ranges because it is the most balanced. It is defined at 85 degrees centigrade to 96 degrees centigrade and will notice a simmering liquid by having small bubbles breaking through the surface of the liquid. It is great for promoting flavor, release in stews, meats, and soups. So in other words, when you say simmering, it is a medium-low heat with some gentle bubbling in the pot. The basic simmer is often used again for soup and stews. Number 3, boiling is the highest temperature for submersion, defined at 100 degrees centigrade at sea level. It is noticeable by rapid movement with many large bubbles. So boiling is a method of cooking food in boiling water or other water-based liquids such as stocks or milk. The food again is immersed in water that is heated near its boiling point. Number 4, steaming. It is defined by the steam released once the water reaches past 100 degrees centigrade. Food is in contact only with the steam produces from the boiling liquid. Steaming is a common method due to its fast cooking times, high heat, and moist heat cooking nature. Of all the conventional cooking methods, steaming is one of the most natural and healthful ways to cook the food you eat. It is a simple technique that allows you to experience the unique flavor of the food itself. When you steam food, you avoid the hidden calories of butter, oil, and other fats, leaving the bright flavors and textures of the food intact. Unlike boiling and simmering, steaming doesn't agitate food. So it's perfectly gentle way to cook delicate items like seafoods and shellfish. And perhaps best of all, steaming keeps all those valuable nutrients inside the food instead of in the cooking liquid. That is the end of our lesson. I just hope that you have learned something today. For your assignment, please do have an advanced reading on our next topic, and please do prepare yourself to review on our previous lesson because we will be having our next quiz on next meeting during our Assess to Learn.